So what I want to talk to you now is syphilis serology for neuro-ophthalmology, and you don't need to know everything about syphilis serology, but you need to know how to order the tests and how to interpret the tests. So the two types of tests are treponemal tests and non-treponemal tests. The treponemal tests are identified by the letter T, and so you've got choices: FTA, ABS as a T, MHA, TP, microhemagglutination for treponemal pallidum, the treponemal pallidum and plasma agglutination test, and the syphilis treponemal pallidum IgG. There are non-treponemal tests. These don't have a T, no T. That's the rapid plasma reagent, RPR, and the venereal disease research laboratory test, VDRL. We need to have both a treponemal test and a non-treponemal test, and the reason is the treponemal test is very specific and very sensitive, but once the treponemal test is positive, it's positive for life. So that's usually just reported as a positive or a negative or reactive or non-reactive. So in this example, FTA, it's just positive and then it just stays positive. However, the non-treponemal tests, they go up, and if you're treated right here, it'll have a 4-fold reduction after treatment, and usually it goes to 0. Some people remain serofast at a low titer, and that means you need to know this original titer before you can assess the real significance of the titer if it's still positive. If it's negative, you're fine. The problem with the RPR and the VDRL is sometimes it goes down for no reason, and that is no treatment. So we have a spontaneous reversion rate of the non-treponemal tests to negative, even if you got no treatment. And so that makes the interpretation of these tests a lot more difficult. So some are easy. If the FDA is positive and the RPR is positive, well, that's easy. You have syphilis. And the CDC says if you have this serology and you have any eye finding, that's neurosyphilis, and that means you have to have a lumbar puncture. And that means intravenous penicillin for 2 weeks, because neurosyphilis is treated differently than primary or secondary syphilis. Likewise, if the FTA is negative and the RPR is negative, that's also an easy one, because that means they don't have it. The harder ones are when one is positive and one is negative. Do the easy one first. The RPR is negative and the FDA is positive. So if this person right here can show that they had penicillin treatment, a piece of paper documenting it, that's good enough, because the FDA is positive and they were treated. If they cannot produce this piece of paper, then it could still be this other choice, which is a false negative RPR. If the RPR is positive, but the FTA is negative, that usually means that this is a false positive, because the non-treponemal tests are not as good as the treponemal tests. In both of these circumstances, you could repeat the treponemal test. So if we do a second treponemal test here, like MHETP or syphilis IgG, and the second test is negative, if 2 out of the 3 tests are negative, just go with the 2 out of the 3, and we'll just ignore the minority report. Same thing here. If you really want to prove that this is a false positive and this is a true negative, then we'll just do another treponemal test. And if 2 of the 3 are negative, then that's enough. You should also know that sometimes the RPR goes negative because the test is bad, and the test is optimized for a zone where the antibody and the antigen can agglutinate. So it's an agglutination test where the antibody binds on to the antigen, and if you have enough of these guys, then you'll see a blob of black stuff, and that is the agglutination. However, if we have a circumstance where we have too much antibody, there's just too much of this antibody going around, then they won't get to glom together, because there's not enough antigen to go around. There's too many antibodies. And you can get the other version of it, which is too much of the antigen, so it like sucks up everybody, and they also don't get to agglutinate. So either the too much antigen or the too much antibody can cause the test to be negative, even though it's really positive, and that is called the prozone effect. Prozone. And one of the ways we can make that go away is we just keep titering it, keep diluting it more, and then eventually you'll land in the zone. So even if it's negative at 1 to 1 and 1 to 2 and 1 to 4, all of a sudden 1 to 8 it's positive. So we can kind of keep diluting it until we can get past the into the zone. So you need to know a little bit about syphilis serology. We order it on any unexplained neurop finding, whether it's pupil or optic neuropathy or cranial neuropathy or nystagmus. It can be anything because syphilis is the great mimicker. Can't really tell who has syphilis by looking at them. They could be old person, young person. You can't tell by gender. There are risk factors. The major risk factor in the United States is male to male sex transmission. However, it can happen in either gender, and regardless of what your sexual preference is, it doesn't matter. You can always get syphilis. And it can mimic anything. So I'm going to order both the treponemal and a non-treponemal antibody in that setting. And if the tests serology are positive, if it's in the eye, CDC says that's neurosyphilis, we're going to do the lumbar puncture, and that means intravenous penicillin.